Babylon has been destroyed so many times it should have vanished, yet it keeps returning in scripture, in politics, and habits you don't notice. The Babylon you picture, sky-stabbing tower and lush gardens, images that barely match the blue brick maze archaeologists uncover. Here, mudbrick met myth. Kings stamped their names into millions of bricks, rivers shifted, and empires recycled Babylon's reputation, sin city to some, sacred center to others. What thinned it wasn't conquest alone, but silts, paperwork, and time. We'll walk Processional way, climb the tower, meet Nebuchadnezzar the builder propagandist, and read clay tablets that outlasted empires, while debunking temple prostitution, the skyscraper Babel, and those famous hanging gardens. This is Armchair Archaeology, where myth meets mud. We strip away legend to find the better story, how cities brand themselves, how ruins remember, how meaning survives brick and stone. Stay to the end. A Babylonian invention you use daily is hiding in plain sight.
The Babylon most of us inherit is painted in absolutes, a tower clawing at the sky, gardens floating above the desert, a city swollen with pride. Walk the ground and it reorganizes itself. Heat shimmers over pale dust, lanes tighten into a careful grid, canals slice through neighborhoods where warehouses once breathed out grain dust. Underfoot, brick after brick carries the same neat stamp, Nebuchadnezzar's name, multiplied until a city becomes a signature. We're in southern Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, on the Euphrates, where water once stitched every district to the river. Sin City was a convenient label rivals love to repeat. Clay tells a plainer, stranger story. Babylon reads like an engine room. Temple courtyards set rhythm, the processional way locks the city to the calendar, a ziggurat, a stepped temple tower and shrine moor the skyline, and bureaucratic veins, canals, gates, tax depots keep everything moving. The spectacle is there, but the system is louder. Pick up a small tablet from a storeroom layer, barley allotments, dates, oil. The wedges are quick and practiced. The scribe's hand steady. Cross-reference if you like it, and a festival, a pay cycle, even a particular official steps out of the dust with unnerving clarity. A single line item can anchor a moment more firmly than 1,000 years of retelling, and the city that was once a sermon becomes a ledger you can read. If stories like this shift how you picture the ancient world, you'll feel at home here. Consider subscribing so you can wander the next site with us. If the excavated city is all logistics, why did the stories balloon into towers and gardens? Because architecture here worked like theater. Processions choreographed emotion. Animal reliefs along the route turned gods into escorts. Blue glazed surfaces caught desert light and made power feel sacred. Even the brick stamps do quiet work. Every wall whispers the same author, and repetition turns authority into background noise. Two Babylons remain, one thunderous with myth, one humming with administration. Yet they feed each other. The legend allures, the system endures, which raises the next puzzle. Who shaped that system into a brand so persuasive that law, theology, and politics could pass as a single inevitable truth? Before Babylon was a capital of brick, it was a capital of ideas, and Hammurabi understood that ideas travel farther when they look like stone. Picture the black diorite steel, tall, finger-smudged by centuries, topped with the king receiving a rod and ring from the sun god. It reads as piety, but works like a logo. Divine approval compressed into one unforgettable image. Below, the text hums with cases and fines, those eye-for-eye lines you've heard quoted. But the real trick is curation. Hammurabi didn't conjure law from nothing. He gathered precedents, edited them, ordered them,
and lifted the package high enough for other cities to see. And no, it wasn't the first law code. Its power was packaging. In the archives, everyday tablets show the system doing its quiet work. An irrigation dispute settled, a debt repaid in barley, a builder fined after a collapse. Each decision nests inside the bigger promise carved on the steel. There is order here, and it wears a Babylonian face. Recognition does the rest. Justice begins to feel not like an argument, but like a pattern. Familiar shapes, predictable outcomes, stamped authority. Set a copy of the code beside a routine case tablet, and the family resemblance is hard to miss. Phrasing echoes, penalties align. The tone of certainty carries across genres. That isn't revolution, it's standardization with a stage. And it travels. When scribes in other cities teach from Babylonian exemplars, they don't just learn rules, they learn how to sound official. The voice of law takes on a Babylonian accent. Along the way, lose a legend or two. Those lurid stories about temple prostitution, Babylon's own records, contracts, marriages, temple staff lists are busy with fees and rations, not institutionalized sex. Sensation thrives in travelogues. The tablets are dull on purpose. Why invest so much in text and image? Because once justice looks like you, every court is a soft embassy. The steel stood in a temple courtyard, but its shadow fell across canals and markets, into the places where decisions met daily life. And once that image held, the city needed architecture to match, an ordered mountain of brick that made divine law visible on the skyline.
Stand where the tower should be, and the desert teaches expectation. The babel of paintings wants steel and thunder. The footprint offers mudbrick, reed mats, and lift-by-lift fill that climbs the sky by patience, not height. Etemenanki, temple of the foundation of heaven and earth, the great Ziggurat, was never an ancient office block. It was a staged mountain for a god to visit, a stair in brick that braided the city to its heavens. Picture the build: crews hauling baskets, foremen checking stamps while the clay is still damp, Nebuchadnezzar's name repeating like a drum line, bitumen, bubbles and braziers, turning the air sharp and tar-sweet. Terraces get edged, faced, weatherproofed. Within, practical mud waits for the next round of care. That's the quiet truth of such towers. They survive because they're renewed. Flood, heat, and salt chew constantly, so a ziggurat is less a single monument than a perpetual project. Kings don't just raise a mountain, they promise to keep it standing. While I've been piecing these layers together, I've kept our Ancient Secrets mug beside me, the Armchair Archaeology edition, etched with a quiet, cuneiform-inspired motif. If you'd like a small companion for your own deep dives, it's linked in the description and pinned comment. Climb in your mind. The staircase narrows, wind picks up. Below, the city settles into a measured grid. Canals silver between warehouses, and the processional way cuts straight as a vow. At the summit, there isn't a cavernous hall, but a compact shrine, intimate as a chamber, where ritual joins earth to sky. From here, priests time ceremonies to the calendar, watching dawn strike temple roofs in a sequence that only works when streets and sanctuaries are aligned just so. The later tale of scattered languages belongs to myth. The lived purpose was choreography. If gates and walls command bodies, the ziggurat tunes the year. The tower taught when festivals began, which way processionals turned, how the city breathed with the seasons. That's why kings write themselves into every course of brick. God, schedule, and sovereign braided into a single climb. And once you've built a mountain that sets the tempo from above, you need a doorway that teaches awe at street level, the blue threshold where the city's heartbeat begins. Turn a corner and the city suddenly stages you. The street widens, paving stones steady underfoot, and the blue rises, deep, saturated, almost wet-looking. Panel after panel of glazed brick, catching light like a river stood on end. Lions pace the walls, shoulders squared, manes combed by a careful hand. Further in, bulls and serpent dragons step in measured ranks. It reads as ornament, until you realize your stride has fallen into a rhythm you didn't choose. This is choreography, not decoration. The processional way bends to frame the gate, then straightens so your sightline snaps into place with the tower and temples beyond. The animals aren't random. Lions for Ishtar, bulls for Adad, and the long-necked Mushushu, Marduk's serpent dragon. Gods turned into escorts that flank you as you move. During the New Year festival, priests carried statues along this very path, and the walls taught the crowd how to feel before anyone spoke. That blue isn't lapis, it's kiln work. Silica and copper fused until sand becomes color. A fired skin tough enough to survive centuries of sun and salt. Walk closer, and the reliefs lift you by increments. Each beast repeats at a human stride, a pulse you match without thinking. Brick seams form a quiet grid behind the images. And at the base, you can sometimes find maker's marks pressed into the edges, quiet proof of who built it. Power here isn't shouted. It's rehearsed until it sounds like common sense. The gate works because it makes awe feel like arrival. By the time you pass beneath its vault, your pace, gaze, and breath are synced to the city's story. A door can do that. A street can too. But staging obedience and stopping invaders are different arts, and these walls were designed for both theater and trouble, which invites the harder question the myths skip. Beyond the glaze and the drumbeat, how did Babylon's defenses actually buy time when someone refused to be impressed?
Herodotus swore Babylon's walls were so broad chariots could race atop them. Stand on the traces and the boast thins to brick and berm, but the truth doesn't need exaggeration. The city wrapped itself in layers, outer earthworks that lifted archers and slowed hooves, inner fortifications in mud brick bonded with bitumen, towers placed where sight lines, not romance, mattered. From above you'd see lines, breaks, and gates arranged to turn speed into hesitation. Defense here was obstacle choreography. The Euphrates split the city, canals stitched the gaps. Gates met water with stone and timber, and the clever part wasn't height, it was control. A river that feeds a city can be trained to bite. Open a sluice at the right moment, and an approach road liquefies. A moat swells to drag at sandals and axles, then bakes into a gluey crust when the sun returns. The cleverest defenses weren't always walls at all. They were water, redirected at the right moment. Measure the gate mouths, and policy shows up in a ruler's width. Trade enters wide and slow where tax stations sit. Military portals pinch into narrow passages with bends that tangle shields and break marching rhythm. Brick stamps repeat at knee height, turning masonry into quiet paperwork, authorship on every course. Angles matter too. Offset curtains deny rams a clean run. It's engineering tuned for daily use, strong enough to deter, practical enough to maintain between floods. And when the Persians came, failure wasn't just a matter of bricks. A system this complex relies on people to lift bars, flood moats, and mind the timetables. The tablets around 539 BCE read like continuity. Offerings tallied, wages issued, canal serviced, same work, new signatures. Conquest here felt less like a smash and more like a handover of keys. If walls can be both theater and plumbing, what kind of ruler thrives in a city that asks for spectacle backed by schedules and supply lists? The one who turned taxes into blue glaze, logistics into ceremony, and his own name into a building material steps through the next gate.
He speaks from clay, first-person lines rolled onto cylinders and buried under thresholds. I, Nebuchadnezzar, walk his city, and the name repeats on gate bricks, on drains, on paving, until authorship turns into infrastructure. Campaigns to the west bring cedar from mountains, copper and bitumen, grain and, most importantly, people. Tribute and labor arrive as raw material. The skyline answers in height and color. His gift is orchestration. Temples don't stand as isolated marvels. They slot into routes that carry festivals like gears. Courtyards angle for shade and wind. Canals feed workshops where glaze recipes are guarded like state secrets. In the brickyards, stamps press in while clay is still damp. Quality control that doubles as quiet publicity, a metronome ticking across the city. Read one of his building inscriptions and the distance collapses. He worries about decay, chides earlier kings for letting sacred places drift, vows to restore to its former line, then thanks the gods for strength to finish. It isn't empty boasting, so much as administration written as destiny. You can feel the planner inside the conqueror. Drains cleared, routes straightened, ceremonies kept on schedule, edges held sharp against heat and salt. Architecture here does political work. The Ishtar Gate stages awe before a word is spoken. The processional way resets pace and gaze. Etemenanki binds calendar to skyline. Beneath the show, ledgers hum, rations for crews, timber deliveries, allotments of bitumen. Hold one of those tablets and you're watching the city's pulse in numbers while the blue brick rises above it. Efficiency has a price. Moving populations as policy brings skills and memories. Among the deported are scribes who will remember him longest, turning the builder of gates into the villain of exile. That paradox threads his voice in clay. A king determined to immortalize order ends up living forever in the stories of those he displaced. The same name stamped into brick turns up in grief as well. And from those paired impressions, the Babylon most people recognize, glorious and menacing, takes its lasting shape.
Empire here doesn't make enemies vanish, it repurposes them. After sieges, officials sort people like assets, soldiers to garrisons, artisans to workshops, farmers to canal edges that need hands. The policy sounds bland, resettlement, but its texture shows up in clay. Contracts measure fields by rope, tally taxes in grain, and line obligations against irrigation calendars. Families arrive, seal documents, learn the rhythm of water and harvest, and the city's reach extends without adding a single battlement. Follow the tablets east, and a small archive surfaces with a telling address, Al Yahudu, town of Judah. Not a prison, more like a file folder turned into a village. The names remember home, fathers and sons echoing the same endings you'd hear in Judah, yet the entries are workaday, lease a plot, borrow seed, repay after threshing, witness signs. The handwriting is Babylonian, the lives inside it are hybrid. Now and then the administrative haze sharpens into a face you know. A ration list notes oil and barley for Yahukinu, king of Judah, Jehoiakim, his status reduced to a line item and an allotment, yet unmistakably present. It's the quietest kind of survival, a defeated monarch traced by kitchen measures. Elsewhere, a debtor from the same community pledges a vineyard, A labor contract sets wages for canal repair. Identity doesn't dissolve. It adapts to the forms the state provides. Clay envelopes instead of chronicles. From these scraps, exile looks less like chains and more like paperwork that moves you and keeps you moving. Communities cluster near canals, keep internal ties, learn local prices, and write themselves into the empire's accounting. The trauma is real, and so is the routine. Both leave fingerprints. If you landed in a place like Al-Yahudu, caught between old loyalties and new routines, would you spend your energy trying to get back or mastering life inside the empire's paperwork? This system holds as long as the center does. When a later king privileges a different cult, spends years away and angers the temple establishment, legitimacy wobbles. A careful apparatus becomes easy to inherit. The next ruler won't need torches. He'll need a promise of normal service and a new seal. And that is exactly the language a certain Persian will speak when he walks through Babylon's gates.
The archives go odd before the Persians arrive. A king, Nabonidus, praises the moon god's sin with unusual zeal, then spends years away in the caravan city of Tama while court business continues without him. Temple accountants keep writing, and in later lines you can hear the irritation. Festivals disrupted, priorities skewed, priests sidelined. In a city where ritual is a timetable, a devotional detour feels like missed payments. Administration adjusts. Belshazzar, the king's son, signs off on grain and silver while his father is absent. Ledgers don't moralize, they record continuity. When Persian pressure tightens, Babylon looks less like a fortress preparing for a last stand and more like a state trying to keep the calendar intact. Cyrus enters speaking fluent Babylonian. His cylinder doesn't roar. It reads like a press release rolled in clay. Temples restored, cults respected, true traditions reinstated after a wayward reign. The text flatters local gods, promises repairs, and frames regime change as a return to normal. Walk through temple archives around 539 BCE and the handwriting barely blinks. The same scribes date to a new king. Later storytellers love a dramatic sack. The clay won't give them one. The gates open, and the bureaucracy gets a fresh seal. Even the famous river diversion tale feels like theater laid over a process already administrative. What changed fastest were titles. What changed slowest were routines. Offerings tallied, wages paid, canal crews scheduled. The surprise is how softly an empire can switch hands. A fall that hardly ruffles inventories leaves a different kind of mark. No ash layer, just new names on familiar envelopes. And once ceremonies stabilize and accountants are satisfied, the city's oldest hazard returns, the one no enthronement can quiet. The river shifts its weight, silt thickens channels, salt nibbles at brick. Conquest here is a signature. Decline is the steady pressure of water and heat. So if takeover can be this quiet, what finally undoes Babylon isn't a battering ram at the gate, but a staircase to the river that no longer meets the water, and a maintenance schedule the landscape refuses to honor.
Not every ending burns. Babylon's arrives by inches, mud in channels, salt on brick, budgets that don't quite stretch. The Euphrates wanders, silting side canals and thickening the city's veins. Crews still shoulder baskets, dredging and patching, but the work feels like bailing a leaky boat. Clear a sluice this season, watch it fur over after the next flood. Pale blooms creep across glaze, edges soften. Courtyards that once rang for festivals breathe only heat. Paperwork tries to keep pace. Temple accounts list repair quotas, corvée rosters, brick tallies. Then lines thin, payments slip, endowments shrink. This isn't a sack, it's slow decline. Maintenance losing to sediment. Meanwhile, gravity shifts toward new hubs, Seleucia on the Tigris, later Ctesiphon across the water. Offices move, people follow, prestige follows them. Walk the old riverfront, and a quiet truth appears. A staircase drops to nowhere, its lower risers scalloped by waves that don't come anymore. One abandoned quay can tell you more than a chronicle, where the river simply changed its mind and took traffic, tolls, and gossip with it. In temple precincts, floors rise with relays, then stop. Doorways brick up and freeze. Rooms that smelled of incense sour to damp. Layers say what speeches won't. The ritual kept trying until the water wouldn't listen. There are still scribes, but their tablets route business elsewhere. There are still festivals, but fewer feet on the processional way. Contracts name neighboring towns, warehouses become houses, courtyards drift into silence one by one. The city loosens rather than collapses. What endures in this fade isn't height or thickness, it's habit, procedures, calendars, a way of organizing meaning that no longer needs walls. When stones stop demanding attention, the idea looks for lighter housing. It finds it in literature, in borrowed laws, in map labels that keep Babylon alive long after bricks return to clay. The body goes slack, the reflection sharpens. That reflection is what later empires inherit, reshape, and parade, proof that a city can leave its shoreline and still flow on, not in water, but in the rhythms people carry forward.
When the bricks quieted, the name got louder. Exiles carried Babylon home in scripture as shorthand for power gone wrong. Later writers turned it into a stage where vice strutted in borrowed costumes. Pain makes sticky myths. Yet artists and antiquarians, centuries on, stared at the same mounds and found something else. Melancholy. Grandeur. A city-sized memory that paints well in moonlight and dust. Archaeology added its own resurrection. In the 19th and 20th centuries, excavators climbed up from the riverbed with walls of beasts in blue, and museum halls learned how to glow. Photographs showed trenches stepping down like theater seats toward the past. Crates of bricks leave the desert and reassemble in Europe, and Babylon becomes a gallery you can walk through. In the shuffle, some legends land in the wrong folders. Those hanging gardens, the terraced wonder almost certainly bloomed at Nineveh, where Sennacherib piped water across ravines and bragged in stone about trees drinking from a mountain vein. The misplacement lingers because the brand is stronger than the map. Open a thin tablet from a later archive, and the afterlife sharpens again. Astronomical diaries track the sky in practical strokes. Night of the 14th, cloud. Third watch, clear. Jupiter near the moon. The king made an offering. Eclipses and grain prices share a line with ritual, politics time-stamped by the heavens. With entries like these, historians can pin events to a particular evening when a shadow ran across the sun and the crowd looked up together. It's a quiet power, the past checking its own pulse against the sky. Modern states borrow the name as a mirror, sometimes a threat, sometimes a crown. Babylon becomes a word you aim, not a place you visit. That elasticity is the trick. The city learned to live inside metaphors because its best inventions travel light. And one of those inventions is still on your desk, in your pocket, in the way you carve circles and hours without thinking. Follow that thread to the end, and the ruins will touch your wrist every day.
We started with two Babylons.
the thunderous city of sermons and paintings, and the quieter city of ledgers, bricks, and scheduled awe. We walked their streets, through a gate that teaches emotion, along walls that choreograph hesitation, up a tower built not to scrape clouds, but to stitch calendar to skyline. We watched exile turn into paperwork, conquest read like a handover, decline like deferred upkeep. And we trimmed the myths. No skyscraper Babel, no temple prostitution industry, the hanging gardens blooming more likely in Nineveh, and no Persian obliteration, just a new seal on old routines. So what survived when the brickwork let go? Open one of those astronomical diaries. Neat wedges charting planets, eclipses, cloud cover, the price of grain. To translate sky into schedule, Babylonian scholars leaned on a way of counting that made division effortless and patterns snap into place. Here's the promised reveal. The most enduring Babylonian monument is in your pocket. Base 60 time and space, 60-minute hours, 60-second minutes, and the 360-degree circle born from Babylonian skywatching and math. Not a monument you can climb, but a scaffold you live inside. You carry that city every time you check a watch or plot a course, every clean turn of a compass rose, every clock face that divides your day without debate. The most durable Babylonian building isn't in the desert, it's the grid behind your schedule. The quiet arithmetic that still times your breath between meetings. Empires recycle each other's myths. Stones crumble, rivers wander, archives mildew. What lasts longest often isn't height, it's a system elegant enough to go unnoticed. Babylon learned how to turn spectacle into routine, and routine into meaning. When the bricks returned to clay, the idea kept walking, in scripture, in law, in the sky's geometry, and in the way you carve the world into hours and circles without ever thinking where that habit began.
If this changed how you read Babylon, myth versus mud, tell me which debunk hit hardest. The not-so-skyscraper Babel, the Nineveh gardens, or the Persian non-destruction? Where have you seen Babylon used as a modern mirror? Music, movies, memes? Drop it in the comments. Share, like, and subscribe to Armchair Archaeology for more Past with a Pulse, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next dig. Ready for your next stop? Jump to Ancient Prophecy Was Just Data Science for the switcheroo, or the full Middle East playlist for the big picture, both on screen and linked below. Until next time, keep questioning, stay curious, and remember, tomorrow has always been ancient. Your minutes and circles are Babylonian, and their fingerprints are still on your day.